My name's Trevor Baines. I'm a live sound engineer. I don't work in studios, I just do live stuff. And I mainly work at the Broodnell Social Club in Leeds. Making sure all the audience can hear the artist properly and the artist can hear themselves properly. Those are the two main things. And using a lot of gadgets to make that happen. I used to play in bands for a living, and I was always interested in what the sound engineer was doing. So I kind of picked up little hints and things from sound engineers that I worked with when I played in bands. Somebody asked me to do sound for some gigs because I had a PA system and I'd been doing it a bit for my own band, and I started just with some low-key gigs and just went on from there. And that was here actually. That was when this venue wasn't putting on gigs 7 nights a week, when it was just maybe a couple of gigs a week. You can do it as an apprenticeship with big sound hire companies. So the kind of companies that bring all the sound and lights into a field for a festival. It would be useful to do a music technology course, although music technology courses tend to concentrate on recording and not on live sound engineering. However, while it does give you a basic grounding in the scientific principles behind it, and while you're doing that, you could be working a small PA in a small room for some DIY event occasionally to get the experience of the actual practical side of it. You can also shadow people that work in venues, or you could befriend a band and go on tour with them, and maybe even they might let you mix their sound. They might not pay you at first, but it's experience. You need experience to do this job. You learn from your own mistakes. I did, everybody does. I was always picking up tips from the engineer that was mixing the bands that I was playing in. So that's how I learned the practical side of it. It does help if you play in bands to do this job. I don't know many people that are sound engineers that have not actually been in a band at some point. I'd say you need to be prepared to work on a part-time casual basis for very little money in order to get the experience to end up doing it full-time, because that's how most people do it. They have friends who are in a band, or they play in bands themselves, who are friends with other bands. One of those bands gets to the stage where they can just about afford to pay a sound engineer, and they can just afford to fit you in the van, so off you go on tour with them and get a bit of experience. Or you've got a friend that puts on small gigs and they need a sound engineer for those gigs. So you do that for very little money, and it might only be once every month or once every 2 months, and that might be the only gig that you do. And you may be studying the rest of the time or whatever. But that experience is invaluable. And one thing that I've just thought of is open mic nights. An open mic night tends to be in a small venue, like a pub. It tends to be on a small PA, very basic. You have to think on your feet. You never knew what you were going to get, and it was bang, 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 and you might have 20 acts in the space of like 4 hours. And, you know, that was a fantastic grounding for me when I first started doing this on a regular basis, was because you just have to cope with anything. Most sound engineers are technically freelance and they're technically self-employed, although they may be somebody like me who works regularly in a venue, in the same venue most of the time. But so long as there's somebody that the venue trusts to work in the venue as the house engineer, it gives you the opportunity to go away and tour with the band for a bit or whatever. Some of the people that do my job do it mostly with touring bands, and other people do it mostly in-house in a venue, and some people do it half and half. It's really whatever you want to do. Generally speaking, if you have family commitments, you're going to be working in-house most of the time, just because if you're away a lot, you're going to miss your family. Touring with bands tends to suit younger people. I'm 50, you know, but I still do it occasionally, but not that often. Generally speaking, in a venue of this size, which is like 400 capacity, and smaller than this, there won't be more than one person in the room that is responsible for the sound, apart from if a band brings their own engineer to mix them, then you'll be working with them, and that's the main kind of interaction that you get, is with the touring engineer that's with a band that's on tour and with using the same engineer every night in different venues. What I like most about my job is the variety, the fact that if you like music, if you work in-house like this, you get to see something different, hopefully, every night. So it never gets boring from that point of view. Being part of what is in effect a team, all the people that manage the venue and run the venue and yourself, and the band on stage and any of their crew that they brought with them in putting on a show and entertaining people. And so at the end of the night, when they all go home happy, you feel the same sense of achievement as everybody else in that team. So that's a good aspect of it as well. The challenges are mostly problem solving when something goes wrong, because with so many technical things happening to make a gig happen, there's usually something during the course of the night that will go wrong, and it's a question of I suppose using your experience to know what it is quickly and fix it. It's the kind of job that's very practical, and therefore you really need to learn from your mistakes and get a lot of practical experience. A lot of students doing music technology courses, if they want to get into live sound, they shadow somebody. They will stand behind me or somebody else working here and see what I do. Generally speaking, as I say, you are self-employed in this line of work, and you have to get as the same as any self-employed person, whether you're a plumber or whatever, you have to get work where you can find it. So it can mean a lot of travelling, because you might hook yourself up with a band that tours a lot, and they might be quite successful, and the more successful they get, the more they'll tour, and the further away they'll go, and you've got to go with them. So if you want to earn the kind of money that a successful band can pay, you're going to be away a lot, you know. So and also it's cyclic. The career of a successful band that's commercially successful, that's known, they'll do a cycle of, they'll go into the recording studio and record an album, and it might take 6 months. They're not touring during that time. So what do? You then have to find some work with another band somewhere else. Make hay while the sun shines, as it were, if you're a touring engineer, if that's all you do. Because you never know when a band's going to split up, and then you have to find another band to work with. But, you know, a lot of people work through agencies, and that's another way of getting constant work, is working through an agency. But then you don't know who you're going to be working with. You can't pick and choose. You know, if they say, like, we need an engineer for this, it's like, well, I don't really like that band, but I'm going to have to work with them now. It's easy enough to make contact with other engineers who are maybe touring with bands, with other bands or whatever, because you kind of meet other people in this line of the work quite a lot, and also, like, all the sound engineers that work around the Leeds area, we all know each other, and so you'll occasionally get a call saying that somebody wants you to fill in for them because they've got a call somewhere else or whatever, and it's kind of like a network of people, and we all kind of cover for each other. It's very useful if you want to do this job to know lots of other people who are in the same position as you, i.e. self-employed, and having a diary that they need to fill up. It's really handy for you to personally know all of those people, because occasionally, well, not occasionally, but quite often, you'll have nothing for a month, and then 2 different people will offer you the same month's work. So then you can phone somebody up and say, look, so-and-so needs an engineer. are you free? Do you want to do it? And then there might be another time when your empty month is when they phone up and they've got 2 different contracts offered, and they can say, you know, do you want to do this? This is a job that involves working unsociable hours. So if you are one of a bunch of mates that all work 9 to 5, you're just not going to see them, because they're going to want to go out on an evening and you're going to be working on an evening, and that is one of the most important things you've got to think about if you're thinking about doing this job. Because although it's great to see bands, work with bands, to hang out with bands, to socialise with them, and you're doing it all in your hours, and their hours when they're working and when you're working. But that's when everybody else wants to go out and socialise and have a good time somewhere else, and you can't be there because you're in a room with no windows doing your job. The perks are, if you love music, you get to do it for your job. That's the best thing I can say. You know, if music means a lot to you and you enjoy being around music and performing, it's a great job to do because you can be part of that performance. It's just great to be part of something, because to put on a performance and put on a show, it always takes a team of people. It's not just the artist on stage. Stay sober, okay? Because the job is too technical for you to have a few drinks and still be able to fix something quickly in an emergency. You need to be able to think on your feet, so yeah. You've got to be tolerant and patient, because sometimes you'll have a band that arrives that has been stuck in a hot, sweaty van for 8 hours, and they really don't want to spend an hour or 2 doing sound checks. They just really want it to be as quick as possible, and you've got to try and keep them happy the whole time, because they're happy to get out of the van, but then they're already tired. They've not actually done anything, but they've been stuck in a van, you know what I mean? They've probably not got much sleep. So you're working with people that might be a bit tired and stressed, so it's not going to help if you're tired and stressed. So you've got to be quite sort of relaxed about things. You've got to be aware that everything that's involved in putting on a live music experience is a compromise. It's not like being in a studio where you're trying to get the perfect sound. And you've got to always be aware of what compromises you can make in order for the show to keep moving, the sound checks to keep moving, being aware of time and the fact that you might have 3 or 4 bands to sound check. And if you spend too long on one band, you're not going to have time to do hardly anything on the other bands. So you're compromising your time allocation for different things that you've got to do. You're compromising how good you can make something sound, because you can always tweak it later. So you compromise it now, and it might mean the band's not entirely happy, but you know you can fix that. So move on and do something else, because you know you've got a time frame in which you've got to do all these things before the doors open. When I first started doing this job in this area, I could not believe how many great bands there were knocking around here. And, you know, it's kind of misunderstood outside of Leeds. It's better than people think it is. There've always been loads of great bands. Sometimes you get like a burst of quite a few really good bands all at once, and then there's a bit of a lull. But even in the lull periods, there are loads of great bands in Leeds. So from an artistic point of view, being involved in the Leeds music scene is amazing, because there's always loads of great bands. The standard is quite high, and sometimes you'll occasionally hear a band say it's difficult to get a gig in Leeds, but like, there are so many venues, so many promoters, So many people putting events on all the time, even just from the very small scale of where it's just like there are only 20 people there, but it's still a really great, enjoyable gig. And the bands enjoy themselves, and there's not a lot of money changing hands, and it's very basic, and but it's just fun. It's a great thing to be part of. The variety of different music scenes. So like you've got all the kids that go to the music college and that are into the jazz and stuff like that, and then you've got the kids that go to the uni that are into the classical and stuff like that, and then you've got all the Leeds Met kids who are more into sort of music technology. And this is a big generalisation, but you find that from those different kind of breeding grounds of young bands coming up, you'll get different styles of music from each area. It's not just music students, it's people that just in everyday jobs that just want to get on a stage and be in a band. There's always been in Leeds a kind of like underground working class grime scene for like years, you know what I mean? The DIY scene, which Leeds is not famous for, but like indie famous for, which is basically just a bunch of bands doing things on a very low-key basis and organising it all themselves, not getting involved with the music business as such, but just literally doing it themselves. And it's not really a commercial enterprise, it's just a way of putting on an event that everybody enjoys. And that's what the DIY scene's about. And that's what has kind of made a lot of great bands in Leeds, just by having that sort of attitude of let's put on a gig and it's going to be fun. And it's just, and it keeps the bands busy, it keeps them gigging, because there's all kinds of little spaces you can do it in. It doesn't have to be in a well-equipped venue like this, it can be somewhere else. And it's like a breeding ground for creativity, and that's one of the best things about Leeds music scene.